I'd like to have a warm welcome and a warm reception for a bunch of wonderful people here tonight. So please, if you can, put your hands together for these wonderful, wonderful people. We have ourselves Mr. BandanaHawk. We have ourselves Rod Shark. We have ourselves RockCandyWolf or Setsuna. We have ourselves Sir Avalanche Gaming or Ava and MrJordilicious. Please, everybody, put your hands together for these wonderful, wonderful people that'll be helping us learn so much about the furry community. Hello, everybody. How y'all doing?
Hello.
Awesome.
Doing well.
Scared.
Well, hopefully we'll try and make it not so scary there for y'all. So I'd like to go ahead and start with introductions because I want to make sure that we have time to talk about the furry community as a whole here. So I'm going to do in reverse order here, and I'm going to start down with Jordy. How you doing today?
Hi.
You just have to introduce yourself.
I'm doing good. I'm doing very good. Thank you so much. So hi, everyone. My name is MrJordilicious, but you can also call me Jordy, which is my real name. I'm a variety streamer, mostly focusing on story-driven games, mainly single-player games, that is. And I also like to focus on, people that watch my community. I like to have a good conversation about various topics. I'm trying to create a very open-minded and accepting community where everyone is welcome, regardless of who you are, what you're into, who you love, all that kind of stuff. So, I'm all about positivity and love and trying to make the world a nicer place, one stream at a time.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm really looking forward to this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ava, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Avalanche Gaming. My persona's name is Avalanche, but I usually go by Ava. My persona is an Arctic maned wolf, very specific and unique. What was that icebreaker we're doing? We're doing what would bring to a deserted island.
Yep, what would you bring to a deserted island? What was your item?
Can I just bring a plane so we can get off?
I said an item. I didn't have any stipulations on it. So yeah, you can just bring yourself a plane.
Yep, then we'll do that. We'll bring a plane.
Fantastic. Ava, thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it, buddy. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Setsuna! Did I do that
right? That's Rod's thing. You have to ask Rod.
No, it has to be like Daytona. Setsuna.
Yeah, like the Daytona game.
Oh my god, perfect. Setsuna, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm RockCandyWolf. I go by Setsuna, but RockCandyWolf is my Twitch name. I'm just a wolf, nondescript. I've never really put any thought into it.
Basic.
Yep. If I had to choose, it would probably be a Mexican wolf, because I'm Mexican, so it makes sense.
Oh, there you go.
And my one item that's, like, I guess realistic would be like a nice big machete, because having some type of blade is, I think, really important.
Fair enough indeed. And Setsuna, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you, buddy. Thank you.
Of course.
Also, quick warnings just before I get up to Rod there. For anybody redeeming a couple of the channel points things, I'm going to do my best to refund those back to y'all. I unfortunately don't have them working on this scene because they work typically on my solo stream just because I didn't want to have too many distractions here. So I will refund those back to you here in a little bit and turn those off. Just giving you a heads up with that. But hydration will still work. Now, with that out of the way, Rod, who are you?
Wait, I'm hydrating.
Just hydrating too.
Here, hold on, let me get it.
Okay, wait, how do we do this again? Hi, my name is Rod Shark. I'm gonna try not to do the intro that I always do when I get rated because it's like on reflex now. But my Sona's name is Slumber, and he is a great white and orca hybrid. So he's a hybrid Sona. One of many. What I would bring on a deserted island, it would be my cast iron skillet. I think cast iron is king. And in a pinch, it'll serve as a weapon, so very useful, There you go.
There you go. I appreciate you being here, Rod. And this is now number 2, so I appreciate your time for multiple. I
know. I'm like, I've been on so many. I've been on all of them.
I know. Actually, you have. You're 2 for 2. Thank you for being here. Now, I hope I've stalled long enough for Hawk to come back. Hawk, are you there?
Oh, I've been here.
Oh, perfect. Hello.
Hello. I'm BandanaHawk. You can call me Bandana. You can call me Hawk, or you can
Don't
call
do
me...
that. Don't do that.
Anyway, that was Rod's intro that I stole. Anyway, my Sona's name is Ranger. I'm a dog. I'm a Doberman Husky mix, surrounded by wolves, but I'm just a dog. And yeah, the thing that I would bring on an island would be a fully charged satellite phone to the island.
I was sitting there earlier and I was like, I just want to bring that like Starlink thing that Elon Musk has put up, and then I thought about it. I was like, yeah, but then how do I power it? And I was like, well, that's going to be a problem. So. And for those of you who are joining this, at least my channel for the first time, hello everybody. My name is PlentyAZach. I am happy that you're all here today. What is happening right now is what is called PlentyATalks, where I bring in different guests, different people that I enjoy working with, watching, and interacting with, where we talk about a variety of topics. And some of these can be pretty heavy, some of them can be pretty light. Today we're discussing the misconceptions and myth busting, maybe not quite necessarily in that order, about the furry community. We're myth-busting issues about the misconceptions. I probably should have said it that way. But either way, that is what's happening here. I appreciate you all being here. I know there's been a lot of follows. I'm sorry that I can't keep up with everything that's going to happen in chat today, as I want to be able to make sure that we do focus a lot on the guests that are here. I am reading chat. I just might not be able to always say, thank you and hello and all that. But if I see questions or if you have stories to share, please feel free to do so. This is kind of like a roundtable discussion where everybody can participate and talk and share their stories. And we will be watching and reading. And if we see stuff that we're able to kind of take a time to talk about, we absolutely will. But I appreciate you all for being here and helping us have this discussion about the furry community. So without too much further ado, let's go ahead and get into the first question. Now, I think something that might hit some people here is, what really is, I know this is kind of a broad one and we'll define it as we get through the further questions here, but what really is the furry community to you?
Do you want to call on one of us, Zach?
Yeah, you want me to? I'll just cold call and just see how this happens, and I'll try my best to keep it as fair as possible. Rod, you spoke up first, so you get to go first.
Well, that's rude. I don't agree. I guess like the word you use, community, is the way that I would describe the furry community. To me, I know it as having people who I consider as close as family and people who I hate so much I would erase them from the planet. So there's a wide variety of people in the community. It's a place where I feel like I could explore myself, I guess, in a way that I wouldn't be able to in real life. I've come to learn a lot about myself here and find people that I really connect with and enjoy. So it's important. I would say it's an important part of my life.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. Thank you. Let's go to Ava.
Okay, so the furry community to me is sort of just it's like a lifestyle. It's like a headspace sort of thing where a lot of different people from different walks of life come together and sort of connect through a very common like. Like I wouldn't have met like anybody in my life right now without the furry fandom. The fandom in the community sort of saved me, and it's like, we're all just completely random people. We're all strangers to each other, but then we connect over the fact that we just like anthropomorphic animals, and we, have our own personality if the world was, different.
That's really good. How about Sasuna?
I think elaborating on what Ava said is, for some people, this may be their only group of friends. You know, maybe I know a lot of furs are or tend to be like outcasts, especially growing up through school. A lot of us were loners. A lot of us didn't really have a lot of friends. So being able to go online and find this group of people that share so many interests, that becomes your friends. So to a lot of people, it's not just, you know, cute animals in artwork. It's your chosen family.
Okay. How about Jordy?
Yeah, I feel so many good things have been said already, so I find it hard to add to that. But I guess I agree. I can relate very much to what Sasuna was saying. Is that, you know, I was never, you know, he said, like, I was never the popular one in high school, and I feel, you know, when I joined the community, I was just sort of, I felt like I walked into a home that just felt like home, like so many welcoming and friendly people, and I could just, you know, be myself. And yeah, it's not necessarily as much like a hobby or anything. It's more, you know, just a group of friends. Even though, you know, most of them I've never met in real life, I would still, you know, call them very much my friends, even though, you know, they live at the other side of the world sometimes, or you only spoke to them online. So yes, it's a very important part of my. It's become a very important part of my life. Yeah.
Okay. And then Hawk, do you have anything else you'd like to add in there?
Well, I don't want to repeat anything, so I'm just gonna sort of like go off on a bit of a tangent. Which is
go for
just
it.
That something that I really like about the furry community since I've joined, I sort of became more active last year. Is that it's a sort of like wish fulfillment. Like, some people, their personas are very much who they are in real life, and then some people, it's like an idealized version of yourself. It is the version of you that you want to be, or it's a version of a type of character that you really like to be personified as. So it's just really interesting to me being able to have this character that I can change much more easily than my physical form, and give myself a sort of like release in that way of like living out this character who may or may not be the idealized version, or like as close to the ideal as I can get at the time.
Okay, I gotcha. No, I think that brings up kind of an interesting question with it too. That I think sometimes when we talk about different communities, we're always trying to figure out, like, is it a hobby, or is it a preference, or is it like intrinsic to yourself? Do you think, and again, by you I mean the royal you, all of you, do you think that being a furry, is it a hobby? Is it something that's intrinsically you? Or like how would you classify like being a furry? Where would you put that at? I know this is kind of a weird question, but yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So for me, while, you know, when new people come in to my stream and they ask, like, you know, they're not familiar with furries, I always sort of classify it as like a hobby. I always, you know, say something like, you know, people who are a fan of Star Wars, you know, they form a group. People who are a fan of Star Trek, they call themselves Trekkies, and they are, you know, a community. And furries, they, you know, in basic love anthropomorphic animals, so they call themselves furries.
Okay.
But to me, to me, it is definitely, like I said before, it's definitely more than just a hobby. It's something that I am, and I always hate saying, like, you know, coming out as a furry, but yeah. I felt that, you know, it did feel when I said to the world and when I shared to everyone that I'm a furry, it did feel a little bit like that, because I shared a part of who I am with others.
Okay. And maybe I apologize if somebody else has something. I just kind of wanted to go on something that Jordy said there. Do we think that feeling of, you know, almost having to come out as something, do we feel that feeling is because of kind of some of the societal standards that are set, that, and we'll talk about this more, that like furries are not necessarily like your not necessarily always good people just because of how modern like media shows it? Like, are we worried about the backlash of like almost looking like a modern, you know, media representation of a furry?
Oh yeah, at least for me.
Yeah, there's definitely some stigma around coming out as a furry.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely feel like
go ahead.
there's like a societal stigma, which is like, from what I can tell, it comes from a lot of like internet jokes about like pretty much the internet humor at some point decided that furries were just like an easy target. Which, random side note, I find very funny because like a lot of the furries out there are ridiculously successful in their personal lives and like are making bank as like, well, bankers or doctors or accountants or whatever. Yeah. And there's people like, oh, furries don't do anything, they don't amount to anything. I'm like, they're the people who run your economy, but it's okay. But I just feel like at some point in the early internet, furries were adopted as like a target, a common target, where it was like this imaginary group of people that you don't actually associate or know personally that you can just target with things, even if it doesn't make sense. And I generally equate it to how people will make vegans the butt of their jokes for whatever reason, as if people who eat plant-based diets are somehow lesser or fit into a specific mold just because they eat plant-based diets. And it very much feels that way, of just like picking this one thing that's an aspect of someone and making it a joke. And that sort of repeated joking behavior makes people feel a certain way. Like, I know I wasn't sure how I was going to be received being more public as a furry. Like, I was just starting out on Twitch and I was worried about like, okay, well, if I start showing my model, will people tune out? Will I lose out on opportunities with other streamers because they look at me weird? Like, I was very worried about all that. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'll just do it anyway.
You know, and I think I was definitely part of that group that was kind of going on with the societal train a little bit, because I remember going to my first con and all the people that I went with were like, hey, watch out for those people. And I was like, what do you mean those people? And they started like describing the furries as these just like creepy sex addict people. And I was like, I remember sitting there, I was like, okay, before I really understood and like knew to like question these type of behaviors. And then I got a little bit older and I remember sitting there at the next con I went to and I was like, who gives a fuck? Like, why does it matter? Like, I remember it was just such a flip key. And then that's when I started like looking at like sometimes like the modern media representation. I'm going to kind of jump script here a little bit, but I know unfortunately and I see a couple people in chat are actually talking about this as well, about the media's modern representation of furries between the CSI episode. I think it's Furry and Loathing, and even the amount of views and clicks that the 2016 March 4th furry orgy at Zootopia. And those are the only things that were ever talked about. When I was looking through and I was doing the research for this conversation, when I typed in furries, those were the first two results that popped up. Now, when I started asking some different questions like what's great about the furry community, stuff like that, I found a very different side of it. Very, very different side of it. Have y'all ever seen something in the media representation that was just... I want to start with the gross stuff so we can get it out of the system now so we can kind of build up into a better place. But have you ever seen something that was just like an absolutely incorrect or just gross representation of what you think that the furries really stand for? And I'll start with Ava.
Other than the CSI episode, I can't really think of anything that negatively puts the furry fandom out there. But that's because I don't actually watch a lot of media and stuff. I hear a lot of talk and stuff, but there's a lot of I don't know. I personally haven't seen a lot of bad things, but I know that there is just a generalized stigma. Like a lot of people, even if they've never met a furry, or even if they've never seen the CSI episode or heard anything about furries, as long as you, like, as soon as you mention furry, they're going to go, ooh, there are those.
Yeah. And that's something that I want to try and, kind of change. And I know we won't be able to affect everybody, but that's something I want to start to change the concept and the mindset of people a little bit with this.
I think Ava's point is really important as well, because it's also saying something else that like sort of occurs to me right now, which is like, when you realize you're a furry and you make furry friends and you get comfortable with the community and you meet the people you like, you care a lot less about the outsider perspective about like what other people are thinking about furries, because you have your own friends. And then like stuff like this happens where like the media, I think like the stigma around furries comes a lot from like misunderstanding things and meeting shitty people, which like is like a huge Venn diagram with the LGBTQ community. Like all the greater public needs is like one shitty person and one shitty event, and then that's all they need to form their opinion. And like there's no like PR person for furries out here being like, no, this is wrong, furries aren't like this at all. Like yeah, there's nobody doing that. I think the furry community at large is just like, we know what we are, and like we know the people we care about and their opinions, and like those are what those are what I'm concerned with most of the time. Like I would never really Google like what happened with the furry community today, like what are people saying today, like that doesn't really cross my mind. To the point where like when you were telling us about your Google results, I was like, the what? The what happened?
Well, and that's what I was. Oh, go ahead, Eva.
Oh, I had never heard about the Zootopia thing.
Me neither.
I remember being in college when Zootopia came out, and I loved Zootopia. I thought it was an amazing movie, and I remember looking up. I think I was trying to go to the IMDb for it because I was curious who one of the voice actors was, and the very first result was massive orgy at Zootopia opening. And then when I was like,
jeez, all
right, I'm interested, and I clicked on it. I was like, this is interesting. Like, and it was showcasing they're like basically a crowd of furries had joined. I think they basically bought out like the whole theater for this like massive opening day for this like giant furry group. And during the middle of it, they broke out into, I think as the article put it, like animalistic grunting, squealing, and mating behaviors. It was the grossest.
That's just furries. That's what just.
But it was just like, it was the grossest like possible description for people were getting it on, and that was pretty much it. And I remember like that was my first or second like understanding, or like what's sort of we're looking for. I was like my first or second like kind of like introduction to like the furry community, and I was like, all right, I guess they have lots of sex, right? And that was like the thought that was kind of left in my mind. As I was like, well, maybe they do just love sex or whatever the case is. And I never really questioned it again because I never saw anything about furries from that point. And Jordy, I see your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, no, I think kind of to continue on what others were saying earlier. I think that's also a thing with like the media in general, because I feel that like sensationalist news is a lot more clickbaity than wholesome stuff. So that's, and I think that happens with like a lot of communities out there, that you always see like the more negative or sensational things in the media because that's what sells, and that's what makes people click articles. And I think like that also really doesn't contribute to people getting a more open-minded and a more neutral view on, well, not just furries, but I think a lot of communities out there.
Especially like if you look at like some of the things that some furries have done recently, like Sitsuna was just part of a charity drive for a week at the end of Pride Month that raised like $10,000 for the Trevor Project. And like outside furries and outside normies is the word I want to use, non-furries, they're never going to hear about that. They're going to hear all of the bad things when it's just like, you know, furries do stuff for the community. Furries do support, you know, charities, and we do good things. But
and see, that was one of the things that I found a lot about when I was actually doing my research. When I got away from what I would call you know, your massive CPK or the clicks per minute or CPM or whatever it is, when you get away from the standard keyword stuff and you start searching up like what's good about the furry communities and stuff like that, you get a whole different side of results of, you know, very welcoming and open communities. And like you said, since my Twitter feed is pretty much consisting of gaming and furries right now, and the furry community has been far more fantastic to actually like read their tweets than anybody else, because there's no toxicity, or at least not from what I've seen. And I think that goes a long way of, at least on my side of it, right, who's somebody who's not deeply entrenched in the furry community, is great. But here's, I think, maybe a struggle that I have as somebody who tries to kind of ally and help spread positivity with these type of kind of marginalized communities. What are ways that we can spread a better word about, in this case, the furry community? And I'll start with this one with Hawk.
You said, how is the best way to spread good about the furry community?
Yes.
I find that Twitch has been a really great way to expose people to furries. That was bad phrasing, but point is, you can't throw a stone on Twitch without running into a furry. There's so many of us out here because obviously we can just be our sonas, which is awesome and not something we can typically do without spending a lot of money. Like, I'm sure at some point we'll talk about fursuits and how they are prohibitively expensive. But so Twitch has been really great, and social media in general has been really great. But at the same time, it's almost a double-edged sword because the furry fandom is so online. It's very easy for people to have one negative interaction and for that to be their whole assumption. Like, I know so many times I've met normal people, whatever, non-furries, who the first thing they say are like, well, furries are like animal sex, right? Like bestiality. I'm like, no. It's just like gay people are not pedophiles. Furries are not automatically zoos. And we actually, like, a large percentage of us find it as reprehensible as, you know, you should find zoophilia reprehensible. So it's that sort of like bad apple mentality of being lumped in, which is why one of the stories I had heard before I had really gotten involved in the furry fandom was about how the furry fandom took steps, which I'm not sure how coordinated of an effort this was, but took steps to rid the fandom of right-leaning recruiting. Like, white supremacists were trying to recruit through the furry fandom because, as we already talked about, people being unpopular, predominantly male, and sort of antisocial, not antisocial, but like less socialized. That is legitimately what white supremacists and Nazis target. So there was a huge issue years and years ago, and from what I heard, there was a coordinated effort of actually cleaning out those predators who were trying to recruit through the furry fandom.
I did not know about that. That's actually really interesting to learn about too. I didn't realize that was such a problem that was happening. However many.
Oh
years
yeah,
ago
Nazi furries are were a big problem. Still are kind of a problem, but less so. Like,
wow,
it's ridiculous to think about. You know, it's like,
yeah,
but like, oh yeah, like Nazis are gonna welcome furries. Yeah, sure, fantastic.
Exactly.
Here.
There was this big drama a few years ago, actually, because someone's fursuit was the Confederate flag, and their entire personality was that thing, and they fed off the drama that came from it and all the publicity. They're of the mindset, any publicity is good publicity. So it's just like,
Yeah.
And that person has been banned from many, many conventions. But they're still around. They still exist in the fandom.
Yes.
Yeah. It's kind of one of those things, like, I guess in any fandom or community that's out there, those bad apples tend to linger and stink up the place for, unfortunately, a long time.
Of course. Yeah, because we're all just people. So you can't just... can't just get rid of them.
Yeah, I had maybe a kind of a follow-up question to a couple points that have been brought up now. Y'all have talked about kind of that a lot of people, or maybe not everybody, right? But a lot of people that have been from the furry community are typically on, I guess, kind of the loner / outcast side of kind of the society. Why is that?
I mean, I have ideas. I don't think any of us knows.
I was like, I know there's not going to be like a one set answer, but I was just curious about why you think that might be the case.
I think a lot of furries have sort of like a big through line with being creative and being imaginative. And that sort of mentality and that sort of person in this kind of world tends to be outcasted because we're seen as very dreamy and very like not with the grit of hard work and study and stuff. And like we tend to like retreat into ourselves, like there's like a part about having your persona that's a lot of fun and very personal, because at once it is both like a representation of you and also a work of art that is you. Like just like when you make art and somebody else like reads it, like if it's a book, or sees it, if it's a drawing, like you feel kind of exposed because it's like, oh my god, like they're reading something I made, they're looking at something I made. Like at the same time, like your persona is like you and also artwork of your ideal you, and it's like oh man, like I want people to like me. And like being the creative, sort of like reserved, like even the most extroverted furries like are people who like still have like reservations about like the way they move through society, like normal society, like the way that like they would be perceived. Like it's like it just seems somehow like the way society is built, it's not meant to really uplift the creative person. And it's not really catered to them, and so lots of furries end up being creative people. And like there's just like this big Venn diagram, I guess.
I think another big thing that appeals to the furry fandom is just the level of acceptance that everyone in it has. So like, going through life, some people discover, that they have, mental, just trying to word this right, mental disabilities, or, things that people without those hang-ups would look at and be like, oh, you're different, we're going to treat you different, we're going to exclude you, and the furry fandom is like, your persona is who you want to be in a perfect world. And so a lot of the times people will, they'll create a persona that doesn't have those sort of things. And like, if you're in your group of friends and they don't see you as someone with that, you're going to feel more accepted and more like you fit in. Like, I don't want to say fit in, but I mean, you're not judged as much.
Yeah, and I think that kind of harkens back to what Hawk had said earlier, that every person kind of can model the persona a little bit differently. Of it could be an exaggeration of themselves, or an idealistic version of themselves, or just a completely different person, right? And so maybe people are using that as just kind of like their own expression, right?
Yeah, exactly, absolutely.
And Jordy, I think I saw your hand up, right?
Yeah. I think also to add to what Eva was saying is that I think because a lot of the people in the community are indeed like, you know, either outcasts or introverts or, you know, people who weren't always very popular. I think for a lot of us, you know, being a furry and kind of stepping into the mindset of your persona is also a form of like escapism, because you can, you know, you get to be who you sort of, you know, want to be, and therefore, you know, you can forget all the troubles that are out there in the world and like all the negativity that is out there. You just get to, you know, be a happy, goofy wolf and don't think about any of the other negativity. And everyone else around you is basically the same, you know, the same, because everyone is, you know, sometimes is their character and everyone just accepts you for who you are.
Okay. Now, before I move on from this, I wanted to check in to see if anybody else had anything else they wanted to add to that conversation.
I think I don't think I have anything extra to add. I think everything I thought was represented here.
Okay.
Oh, but I do want to say to your earlier point about like spreading like the better part of furries or whatever, like what Ava had mentioned about how Setsuna took part in like charity streams, I think it's always like a great thing to highlight. I mean, it's the same thing that we do with gamers, raise money for charity, like highlighting good work that people do. And also like Setsuna himself, who's been awfully quiet. I've been keeping an eye on you. I notice.
I can add more.
He's a family friendly streamer, something that I really could never do, but like that means that his environment tends to be much more open and like careful and caring to everybody. And I think having somebody like Setsuna like as your first experience into the fandom is like a really great way into seeing that like it's not all what the media paints it up to be, you know?
Okay. All right, so understood. So when I get questions later on about who they should go watch, I just send them to Setsuna, and then he sends them
to Setsuna first. Yeah, exactly.
No,
It's not first.
I was like, I think there's quite a few great people that I could send them over to. I'm looking at 5 of them right now.
absolutely.
Ooh, woo.
I'm here too.
That's why I said 5.
Avalanche.
So
I actually
go ahead.
earlier when we were talking about like the condemning of furries, it made me think of a really great quote from Pirates of the Caribbean, the first movie, when they almost catch Jack the first time, and Norrington says, "One good deed is not enough to redeem a man of a lifetime of wickedness." And Jack's response is, "But it seems enough to condemn him." That's like the furry fandom. I just don't get it. Just like being a furry, you're already. It's like being, you know, LGBT. You're just already condemned. It doesn't matter. I've seen people. Yeah, and I've seen people even argue that we hide behind and use charity as an avoidance technique, which I think is a load of, you know, baloney.
Yeah, and I think that's part of some of the issue too, right? And somebody in chat had actually pretty much said exactly what I was about to say here, which was it's hard to change people's opinions that don't want to have their opinions changed.
Oh yeah.
You know, like we're sitting here right now kind of in a I'll call it not necessarily an echo chamber, but it's hard for me to pull in people that are maybe not of the same mindset, because most of the time those type of people are so set in their ways that there's nothing that you're going to be able to do that'll ever sway their opinion one way or the other. And and that's why I was like, I wanted to ask this question, because like, you know, if I like, right, as an ally of this type of a community, maybe I can try to do some stuff. Like that's why I'm trying to do this right here, right, is to try and bring some more perspective to this community, to show a different side of it. And maybe that's just something that I can try and take on myself too, and others in chat, in the communities and stuff like that we can try and take it kind of a little bit on ourselves, right, to showcase and spread those type of good, positive activities. So
Yeah, you'll never. Go ahead, Jordy.
Go ahead.
All right.
I was going to say, I think that
Go ahead,
education is definitely a very important thing too. Like you said, there's always going to be people that just are not open-minded, and whatever you say and whatever you would show, they will just not, you know, change your opinion. But I think when people seem that they are, you know, somewhat willing to at least learn and change their opinion, I think it's very good to just, you know, showcase and show that it's not just all the negativity that they see in the media. There's actually a site that I have referred many people to, which is literally called whatarefurries.com, which is a pretty big, one giant page with like a lot of examples of what furries are, and that kind of takes away a lot of the misconceptions, I think, as well.
I'm about to post a link to that exact site just for anybody else who wants to take a look at that. I appreciate you letting me know. Because one of the things I try and do is find resources on this. And this was the one I was looking for, actually. And I could not find it. I remember somebody posted this a while back, and I could not find it for the life of me. Of all things, I didn't type in what are furries. Thank you for that. And Setsuna, I know you were saying something, but I wanted to circle back to see if you had anything else you wanted to add to what Jordy was saying there. You were muted, by the way, just in case you don't know.
Thank you. I was typing, so
that's okay.
Before I was going to say that you'll never change someone their mind who has an implicit bias. It's a bias for a reason.
Yeah. Yep. And that's one of the things we got to just try and work on. Just changing it a little bit. So I want to switch gears just a little bit here, and I kind of want to talk about essentially how you all became and kind of figured out and learned that you're like, wow, being a furry is fucking dope. I wanted to ask this. I guess maybe this is kind of a lumped question here. Is when did you know that you were a furry? Or like when did you like, hey, this is a really cool thing? And how did you come about your Sona? And this one I'll probably call on everybody. So I'll start with Setsuna.
I don't know if I've been in the fandom the longest here, but I found the fandom in 2000. So it's been a hot minute. I was pretty young. And by today's standards, I myself would be concerned if someone like me was hanging around communities because I was very young. But I was safe, which is the big key thing there. But I found it through artwork, either on DeviantArt or an image gallery that still exists, I believe, called VCL. Its interface is horrible. It's like a database. So it's really not efficient for like searching anything, but a lot back then artists only had personal websites. There was no Twitter, there was no MySpace, there was nothing where you could like make a following. So everyone had their own personal websites at that point. And I just found it through art. I was really into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I was just I wanted to be a Ninja Turtle when I was a little kid. I wanted to grow up and be a turtle. But yeah, I was just trying to find like other people who were fans of the Turtles or like artwork or whatever I could, and that led me to the fandom. And I don't think I really considered myself part of the fandom until probably like 2003. That's when I realized that there was actually a fandom. Okay. And I started getting into it like that.
So follow up with this one, because this is something I kind of want to work on with everybody here with it. How did you come about Setsuna proper? Like, how did you know, like, Setsuna's a wolf, Setsuna's the name? Do you remember how that came about?
Yeah, there was an anime in 2000 by the name of Angel Sanctuary. It was only a 3-episode anime and it had a full manga, but the main character's name was Setsuna. Okay. And I was really obsessed with it at the time, and I loved wolves. I'm Native American and Mexican, so like the wolf thing just kind of came naturally. Okay. I had like all kinds of wolf stuff growing up, so that's just how it came about. And as many of us, I'm sure, will share, I've gone through plenty of changes in my design. Like I started out completely black, just 100% black with yellow eyes and a red tuft in my chest fur. And then it just kept changing year after year. I was like, well, what if I add this? And what if I add this?
Okay. That's really cool. That was actually a follow-up question I had after all this is, do people change their sonas? So that kind of answers that question.
Absolutely.
There's more to be said about that too, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I was like, I'll dive a little bit more into that question after this one, but I really want to focus on this one here. I'll go next with Hawk, actually.
So as for how I found the fandom, I think I found the fandom like early high school. So this would have been 2010, early 2010s. And I don't really remember how I found it. I think it was just I was on the internet a lot, and I just started to see art of anthropomorphic characters, and I found it really interesting. But it was a time where, and this is why I talk about social stigma on the internet a lot, because at the time I became aware of the fandom and then immediately was like faced with the stigma around it, and I immediately like dropped the fandom for years because I was like, I don't want to get too close to this and risk basically like I was a child. Yeah. So I was like, I don't want to risk like losing all my friends and family and blah blah blah. And of course I was also like at the time facing the reality of the fact that I might be gay, so like there was a lot going on for a little 14-15-year-old Hawk. So fast forward to this past year with the pandemic and everything, and me getting on Twitch and me just kind of meeting other furries, and I was just like, oh, you can just like live a regular life and also be a furry? Cool. And then immediately I was like, all right, I'm back in. And I just deep dive. You can see I'm still in like my Sparkle Wolf phase. Lots of bright colors.
We never leave that.
My Zona was just kind of like, I just kind of sat down and thought, okay, well, I love the color blue. Pink is a great like accent color, and then like this like dark pink, and I was like, so I just kind of went with a color palette first and then started to think about some finer details, like the tattoo on my arm, which you can't really see that well because
I can see a little bit of the blue strip right there.
Yeah, it's a spiral, and I essentially have the same tattoo on my arm in real life. I have a Hearthstone. I just took the blue spiral out and slapped it on my Sona's arm. And I have like a personal story about that tattoo, but that's not the point. But yeah, so I'm sure Ranger's gonna change over time. I'm sure I'm gonna change and develop, but like right now, this is who I am. The name just I kind of like workshopped it with some friends. Like Rod, I was like, what should I name my Sona? And we just had a conversation one night and settled on Ranger.
I remember.
I too.
That's really cool. Thank you. All right. Next, I'll go with Ava.
So my first experience with the furry fandom was back when I was in my first job. I was kind of exploring myself, learning that I was, well, at the time I thought I was gay. And I started talking to this guy, and he sort of just like described me. He's like, okay, so you're into wolves, you like anthropomorphic animals, so you're a furry, right? And my very next response was, no, I don't have sex with animals. Are you kidding me? And I was just, I had this misconception in my mind.
Yep.
And he's like, okay, well, that's maybe not what the furry fandom is about. Maybe you should explore it. And so I did. I sort of looked into it a little bit more. I didn't really come out as a furry until maybe a couple of years later when I met my first partner. He was a furry, and he sort of introduced me to the fandom that we, the local fandom we had back in New Zealand. And from there, I sort of just, that was my experience. I've had nothing but a good experience with the furry fandom since then. And how I came about Avalanche. So this actually stems from my creative past. I am an author, I'm a writer, I have published novels.
That's really cool.
And one of my stories that I started writing was based around characters from the furry fandom, and I started writing about a character who was one of my friend's crushes. It was an original character that I just decided to have a crush on one of my friends. And as I started to write him more, I'm like, this is me. You know, I'm just writing in me. And then I started talking to one of my friends, and they drew me a reference sheet, and I'm like, this is me. This is who I would be in this world.
That's really cool. So one thing I wanted to ask, as a follow-up to you specifically, Ava, I don't know if necessarily you are particularly changing your, oh yeah, Ava, that's totally fine. I know you're changing at least the name of yourself, right, from Avalanche to, I saw it on Twitter, it escapes my mind currently.
Nothing is set solid yet, so I will be changing my Twitch name, but...
Okay. Will you be changing anything else, or is it just the name?
It's just the name. My persona will always be called Avalanche, and this isn't the first persona I had. I can go into that if you
please do, because that's what I was kind of curious about.
So my very first persona was a red dragon wolf hybrid.
Okay.
It was just a wolf with dragon wings who could control fire, and his name was Asher. But as I continued to write my stories and Avalanche sort of came to life, I'm like, both of these characters are me, but because I want to sort of evolve who I am as a person, because I was going through a lot of personal change, I'm like, I sort of pushed Ash to the side, and I'm like, I want to be more like Avalanche. I wanted to, feel like I'm growing as a person, and then I'm not who I used to be anymore, and that's why I changed.
Okay, gotcha. No, thank you for sharing that story, because that was something I was kind of curious about with just being kind of involved with a little bit of your community and you. I was just curious what that story was, so thank you. All right, I'm gonna go next with Jordy.
How I found the furry fandom, funnily enough, I guess my first encounter with it was actually through that one notorious CSI episode when I was younger. We at home we always used to watch CSI, so it just kind of came up. And I remember, I don't know what age I was, but I remember that I found it somewhat interesting, not necessarily the sexual things that they did in the episode, but just the entire people dressing up as animals kind of stuff. But that was basically it, because we didn't really have internet back then, so that was I saw that and I was like, oh, that's funny and interesting, and that was it. Then many years later, there was this other TV show that followed people that had an interesting story to tell, and they followed a bunch of furries around in that show where they went out and about and did fursuiting in public. And I saw that and I was like, oh wait, I remember that from when I was younger, and I remember that I thought it was interesting, so it kind of sparked again my interest. But I never really was able to sort of do anything with it, and I never knew that it was a bigger thing.
Okay.
I kind of sort of discovered that there was an entire fandom and community around it, actually on Twitch, last year, I guess it was. I always say that I always felt that I was a furry, I just didn't know that it was a thing. But I just happened to stumble on a furry streamer at the time, and I was like, oh wait, this is apparently a thing. And then I found more streamers, and I found the community, and that's when things kind of snowballed into where we are now.
Okay. So how did your Sona specifically come about? How did you settle on your current design? What was that process of you kind of figuring out who you wanted that to be?
Yeah, so my persona's name is Brooklyn. And as for I think I had the name before I had anything else. I settled that I knew that I wanted to have a name that I always like names that are based on cities. So for a very long time in my head, I had the name Dallas because I just thought it was a cool name.
I love it.
Then I started.
Yeah.
Oh, so what was that?
Oh, Jordy, I just said I love it.
But then I started thinking. I was like, yeah, I want my city I want it to mean something for me. So I have no connection with the city of Dallas whatsoever. So it didn't make sense. So one thing that I do have a massive connection in, in my heart is the city of New York. Even though I don't live there, I'm not from there at all. I just feel sort of like that's where I should be, even though I'm not. So I started playing on that. Like, okay, is there anything from New York City that I can use as a name? And then I kind of came on, the neighborhood the village of Brooklyn. And I think, it's a cool name. And at first I thought it was only like a female name. So I Googled and, people decided that it was okay for both. So that's why I was like, okay, well, if people agree, then I do so too. So that's how I got the name. And then I think I went with the wolf, which I guess is very unoriginal maybe in the fandom, but I always see myself a little bit as a lone wolf. I'm not necessarily one that does well in big groups. Even though I know wolves are pack animals, you always hear the term lone wolf. So that kind of resonated with me. And I feel wolves are very loyal, which I also see as a quality in me. I don't think I would ever betray my friends or people that are close to me. So I kind of settled on that because I felt it, I think characteristics are also part of me.
Okay.
And in terms of the design, when I first created my Sona, I dyed my hair for the very first time in a bright pink, and I kind of loved it. So I was like, well, my Sona is gonna have bright pink as well. And my actual hair went through many different colors by now, but I kind of stayed on pink.
Okay. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's actually, I love hearing all these stories about like how all this came to be. This is really cool. Thank you.
There's one thing I'm not sure if you can see. I might try and turn around, but on the back of my persona is I have a tattoo that I don't have in real life, but I had it on my Sona, which is the logo of the fireflies from the game The Last of Us.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because that game also means a lot to me. That game really resonated with me, and I went with the Firefly logo because their slogan is when you're lost in the light, look for the darkness, or when you're lost in the dark, look for the light.
That's really cool.
And that's something that really, going like, I think Eva said it before, having been through some mental health issues as well, and that sentence really resonates with me. So that's why I wanted to have that incorporated on my Sona as well.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I agreeing with what chat's saying. That's good taste indeed as well, even beyond the rest of the meaning with it. Great game as well.
I had also never thought of like the name Brooklyn as a girl name, but what's funny is like Brooke and Lynn are very gendered names for girls, but like together as Brooklyn, it's not. That's funny. I'm sorry. That was like it just clicked when you were like, "Is it a girl's name?" I was like, "Why would it be a girl's?" And I was like, "Wait, I hadn't thought about it."
It's always, I don't know, language and how a lot of that came to be is always a very interesting topic of one that I don't know very much about because I math and science is my love language. So now, last but certainly not least, Rod, Shark, Slumber, how did you come about?
Oh my god. My story is very long and specific. If you want me to stop talking, please cut me off.
You're okay.
Because me and the furry fandom have had like a very long history. It's kind of contentious, but it started. This is so embarrassing. I can't believe I'm going to say this. It started with Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. It started from the Sonic fandom. Okay. I became a furry because there was a very important forum for like kid Rod called Chow Paradise, where I spoke with people about raising chows in Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. Okay. And then that developed into like a lot of friendships with people. And something that would happen, obviously, is that we would all start creating our own like Sonic characters. And like something that happened, something that I dabbled with a little bit on those forums was what used to be called spriting. Like now you would just call it like pixel art. But like spriting back then was like you would take a Sonic sprite and then you would edit it into like whatever you wanted it to look like, and eventually like edit it into your own characters. And so I've had 3 personas, if you count Slumber. I've had 3 personas over my time in the furry fandom, and my first one was an edit of Tails. His name was Sinclair. He was a blue kitsune. So like kitsune are like fox demons. They have many tails. Sinclair had 3 of them. And Zach, I don't know if you want to see this at all, but I found a picture of him.
Oh my god!
Like
if you have it, I'd love to see it.
I'm sending it to you right now.
All right.
like I edited this. I sprited this with the help of some people on some forums.
Perfect.
And he was my very first persona, and I knew like that's when I became like a furry, and I knew like the furry fandom was like a thing because at the same time I started sort of like long distance dating somebody who was an established like furry in the forums, and he like noticed me and I noticed him, and like, you know, ooh woo, whatever. But like he like helped me come up with Sinclair, and like there he is. I hate it.
Hold on, they can't see it just yet. Wait, they can't see it yet because I have a different mode on.
I hate it. It's so embarrassing.
There you go, everybody. There it is.
So he has like
it's
fingerless gloves, and he has these pants because I made him into a fighter. Something that has lasted throughout all of my personas is that it's the anime influence, but they all have special powers. And they all have fighting capabilities. Like eventually maybe I'll turn it into a comic or whatever, but like cool. Sinclair specifically was able to like fight with energy manipulation. He has like these fingerless gloves that he always fights with. He was so specific. This has always been me and my personas, super specific. And then so like after like the Chow Paradise forums and whatever, I ended up like dating a guy in real life for the first time. Like not in real life, like long distance relationships are real, but you know, like non-long distance. And he was a furry, and that experience was very, very bad. He was very toxic, pretty abusive. He loved very bad things. And his friends were also trash. And they were also furries. And I remember it's like a very specific memory of visiting his friend's house and the whole apartment smelling like cat piss because nobody cleaned up after the cat. Nobody took out the trash. Nobody did any of the dishes. The most popular furry in the friend group never spoke to me because all he could do was speak through the laptop. Like all he did was type, but he didn't make any eye contact. He didn't ever make any attempt to talk to me. And like this was a very bad relationship. He tried to get me in trouble with the law a couple of times. Because that was like something he was into. Yeah. And so like after he and I broke up, I was like, I'm taking a break from the furry fandom. I was like, this is a bad experience. And what's funny is I had been given a lot of warning about like a good portion of the New York City furs. Like this is something that like I learned at the time, but like every state has their own like furry community, and they all have their own reputation. And the New York City furs had a specifically bad one, like the ones in the city, specifically. And I didn't know
confirm.
That. Yeah, so
as someone outside of New York City, it's a very well-known thing about the New York City furs.
Yeah, and so I figured I found that out firsthand. And then I also went on a really bad date with a fur, and I was like, I'm done with furries. But like, what's funny is like when you are a part of the furry fandom for so long, like it's also something something that's become a part of my identity at this point. So it's not really something that I can give up. And so like even while I was out of the furry fandom, I created a second Sona that nobody ever saw. There was no art made of him at all because I wasn't part of the fandom. And his name was Grimnal, which was like a mashup of a character that I was playing in an MMO at the time called The Secret World. But his name was Grim Hymnal. And so I just made my Sona named Grimnal, like a combination. And he was like a ghost wolf persona. And like, I don't know if you play World of Warcraft at all, but like the Death Knights, that Arthas, like he was very much like his story was very much that where like he was a dead werewolf that repossessed his body, and so like he was not quite a zombie, not quite alive. Very much a reflection of how I was feeling at the time. And like that period of my life was like pretty dark, not as dark as high school was, but pretty dark. And then eventually like I didn't really come back fully into the fandom, I would say, until last year, after like talking a lot with BandanaHawk and Hackbolt, a mutual friend. Like, I think it was Bolt who was the first one of us who was like very furry, and then like got into the furries on Twitch, and then Hawk and I were both like, well, wait, that looks like a lot of fun. And then like that was when I was like, I think I want to try this again. Like, let's try the furry community again. And like the furry community on Twitch is very different, very different than my experience has been so far. And like it's kind of funny because like I feel like even the fandoms that everybody else is in are also different on Twitch. Like the D&D fandom different on Twitch than in real life. Like the fighting game fandom very different on Twitch than in real life. Like there's something about Twitch that makes it different. But during that time last year in the winter is when I started coming up with Slumber. And originally he was just going to be a great white shark. And that was because there were like two reasons. But like sharks had always been an animal that had really scared me. And like, because they are scary. And but like I had also kind of admired them for it, you know, like they were always super cool to me. And so I was like, let's like lean into this like fear a little bit, and like let's make a persona around an animal that I feared, which was the great white shark. And he originally was just going to be a shark. Like it was just going to be a black and white shark, because black and white great white sharks actually exist. Their coloration changes a lot. But I noticed that like when I was making him in concept, he looked a lot like an orca. And I really liked the idea of incorporating the orca part as an actual part of the persona. And so like then I was like, okay, we'll make it a great white orca hybrid. And then like it's really just sort of like spiraled out from there. And I like, because my imagination is relentless, like I've created like a whole world where Slumber comes from. And like I don't know, like I spoke about this on stream once because people were like, what, we want to know. And I was like, I don't know, it's embarrassing. And so like a lot of my personas have been like very close to heart. Like they've been things that I've made to reflect how I feel in the moment. Like me choosing an animal that I feared was very purposeful, because like Twitch scared me, you know, like being out in public like this scares me. Like I enjoy public speaking, but that doesn't mean it doesn't make me afraid every time I turn on stream, and every time there's a problem. And, like it's all scary. And so I was like, well, as long as we're leaning into the scary stuff, like we'll make a persona around things I'm afraid of. And what's funny now is I love sharks. Like
so it kind of helped you almost in a sense like conquer that fear a little bit, right?
Like some sort of therapy. Like I went from being afraid of sharks to really caring about them and really loving them. And it's been a really fun ride in that way. So one follow-up question, and perhaps maybe I missed this, but how did Slumber specifically, like the name, how did you come about the name? I think like throughout my life I've been really attached to this idea about death and the afterlife. There was like a very large portion of my life where I was very religious, and that ended. But it, like my musings about the afterlife had never ended. Like it didn't end with it. And so something about death that always struck me as funny is that it was very similar to sleep. Like sleep always struck me as like a very like temporary death. And so like I wanted like the name for Slumber came about because I wanted him to be related to something having to do with like the state of mind, or so like the absent state of mind that people are in when they're asleep. Like I wanted there to be a sense of like calm, a sense of like and like a sense of death that wasn't just the name death or whatever. And I settled on like, okay, well, like I like the word sleep, like let's like what are adjectives or like what are like synonyms to the word sleep, and Slumber was one of them. And I was like, I really like this name. And I'm really like how Jordy likes city names for like things. Like I really like words as names. I think those are really cool. There was a Gundam. This is kind of related. There's a Gundam show I was really into at the time, called Iron Blooded Orphans. Very good, very bloody. It's about child soldiers. Please watch it. It's amazing. But there's one of my favorite characters from that show. Her name was Laughter, and I was like, it always like kind of struck me, like because she was like a really important character to me, and her arc was like really devastating, and I like it sort of like hung with me, like how her name was a word. Okay. And I was like, I think I really like that, and so like I wanted Slumber to be the same.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that too, because like I said, like and thank you again to all of you to sharing that, because I know that sometimes this type of conversation is such a personal kind of question to be asking, right? Because everybody's Sona is going to mean something very different to them, and it's going to change on how personal it is from person to person. So I appreciate, getting to hear about the stories and the perspectives that each of you get to bring to this type of conversation. So thank you. One thing that I wanted to kind of ask as kind of a follow-up to this, of like how did all of you kind of come about your Sonas, is for others that are out there, either in chat or people that I might be able to help post myself or stuff like that. What type of advice and or maybe resources would you recommend for people that are trying to dabble or trying to understand more about the furry community, or trying to like figure out the Sona for themselves? And I'll start with this one with Jordy.
I think, well, like for me, like I think it has been said before as well. I think Twitch is definitely a very good place, because there's secretly so many furries on Twitch. They're like all over the place.
Yeah.
And because I feel that because the entire community is so welcoming, like if you are like furry curious, I think everyone is more than happy to lead you to resources or help you in any way. One thing that I think is definitely good to know for everyone that wants to get involved is that I think one misconception is that you are not a furry unless you have a Sona or a fursuit or anything like that. And I've seen people say like, yeah, I can't be a furry because I can't afford a Sona or I can't afford a fursuit or anything like that. But I think you don't need the gear or like the things that you have don't make you a furry. If you feel you are a furry, you are interested in any of it, then you call yourself a furry. So I think that's maybe like a good takeaway for people that might be on the verge or interested in joining.
Okay, thank you.
And I hate that assumption. It's just so false.
Yeah, because it's like, right, like if it's something that you feel, then shouldn't it just be as is, right? Like why do you need to have like gear or other stuff essentially to be considered and be a part of that community, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to kind of open this up because I think Jordy had a lot of really great points there too. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I would say if you became curious about furries because of a streamer you watched, like ask a streamer a little bit about like what they think about the furry fandom, or like ask the questions you have. And like if it's not guaranteed that they'll be welcoming. I mean, like I feel like any of us on the panel would be super welcoming to those questions, but like I guess like lean into the way you found out about it, like if it was art, like learn about the artist more and look at more art. And then there was a streamer, like maybe interact with the streamer a little bit, ask them about what furry means to them, and tell them that you're trying to figure it out for yourself. And then like maybe they can offer you some advice that helps. And then eventually, like once you're comfortable identifying as a furry, or maybe like coming up with like a persona and whatever, like then make up what the rules are for you on your own. Like you don't have to be a furry the same way that Ava's a furry, that I'm a furry, like, and all I can tell you is that if you don't have to want to wear a fursuit to be a furry. I don't want to own one. They look uncomfortable for me to be in, even though I love them and I love my friends who have them. I don't want one for myself, and like that doesn't mean that I'm not a furry. Yeah.
Okay. So is there, I don't know the right way to ask this question. For those that are just really lost on what type of Sona that they want to have, whether that like what even type of creature that could be, whether it's, you know, aquatic or aerial or ground based or anything like that. Is there like a, you know, a quiz out there for like things you can put in to like, you know, hey, does, you know, fill out these things and, you know, this might be a recommendation? Or would you say that coming up with that Sona of yours is more about just feeling what you want to be?
I would say it's a bit of both. I would say you could go either way. You know, you could, if you have an idea of what your persona could be, or like you have a favorite animal, then certainly go for it. But like, there are so many unique personas out there, and not all of them are like real life animals. You know, you have things like Rod or Slumber is a hybrid. You know, you have my other persona is a Dutch angel dragon, which is just like a fluffy dragon. You know, there are so many special and unique species out there that even if you wanted to just create one, you absolutely could, and it would be received within the community. And as long as you're not stealing other people's ideas or ripping off, you know, other people's intellectual properties, then, you know, you're going to be accepted.
Fair enough. I think that's very well said, actually. Thank you for putting that out there. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add to that before I go to the next question?
I know for me, I've had a few friends come into my stream and express interest in the furry fandom, and I have had a couple of times where people who I've met on Twitch have come into the stream, mentioned being kind of, I guess for lack of a better word, fur curious. And I just like shut down stream and divert all my attention to them immediately.
I've been there. Yep.
So excited. And like we talk about, like I've had them do quizzes, but I don't generally love quizzes because like I've done quizzes and gotten animals that I'm just like, I don't see this at all. It might be a good place to start if you have like no expectations or no direction, but like and for, you know, if anything, it might give you an idea of what you don't want. Like if you got an answer and you were disappointed by it, it might give you a direction for what you're looking for. But my advice to people is always just go with what feels right, and then it can always change and evolve and develop as you do. It's a representation of you, which means just like we're always growing and changing. Our personas can always grow and change and mature.
Yes, nothing is set in stone.
There's also a bunch of like free online resources. Like if you know what sort of animal you want, you can go to, like, I think For Affinity might have some, but they'll have like these free bases, which is like what Rod said about the spriting sort of thing, where you sort of just take a base and you just recolor it to however you want, and you can, you know, that can be your reference sheet until you can, you know, afford something better. Obviously you don't need one, but it's just like it's a stepping stone of like discovering who you are as a furry.
Okay, thank you for that.
And I think maybe to add quickly to like the quizzes thing, maybe like a very nerdy way of doing it, but what I did is I just looked at traits that I felt, you know, are important to me. So I kind of made like a mind map or a word cloud, and then I just kind of looked like, okay, what animals fit with that? So kind of the other way around maybe.
Okay.
Definitely.
One question I do want to ask, actually, which I think is a great question. What is a ref sheet?
Ooh, I can answer this. I was just typing this. A ref sheet. Ref is just short for reference. It's a sheet of your character that an artist can use to recreate your character correctly. Like generally, it'll have like a front view of your character, a back view of your character, and like any specifics, like the color palette of your character, whether they have like anything specific like a tattoo or pointy ears and stuff. And all ref sheets look a little bit different, but they all serve the same purpose of like trying to inform the artist who is making your character what it should look like.
Okay.
And Zach, I sent you my two if you wanted to.
Oh yeah.
Maybe bring those up as like an example. I sent you both of my main personas.
I was actually just about to ask if somebody had a ref sheet that I could show, because I didn't want to pull somebody else's property without their permission. So thank you. I'll pull this up here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and ask the next question. So while I'm diddling with this, so one question that I kind of wanted, that kind of developed from, I think, some of the conversations that we've been having here is fursuits. What about them makes them so ungodly expensive? Is it just the one-offness of it, like the individuality of like handcrafting, or like what? I looked it up and I was like, oh my god! Like, yeah, I was just curious about that. You know, for people that might know a little bit more about it than myself.
Labor and experience—that's what you're paying for. Someone else's craft, because generally speaking, from my understanding, the parts, all the fur and everything that you use for a fursuit, generally costs anywhere from $200 to $400. That's for all of your faux fur, which is actually plastic. Yeah, to like the foam that they use, stuff like that. And for people who might be unfamiliar, a full fursuit, meaning like it covers your entire body, can range from $1,000 to someone who's inexperienced, all the way up to $5,000 or $6,000 for a maker who's much more experienced and has made a lot of them and is very popular.
So my ref sheet that you have actually up there, I got quoted on a suit for Anarchy, and he was going to be $5,500 to $6,000.
Easy, yeah, because of the wings.
Yeah, the wings.
Sure, it's because of the wings.
The wings, the tail, and the gradients are going to be $5,000 to $6,000. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the gradient, I'm sure, because not spray painting, but what's it called?
Airbrushing.
Airbrushing. There we go. Airbrushing would be involved, which is unfortunate because then it also makes it a little less durable. You have to be even more careful with anything that's airbrushed.
That's honestly really interesting to hear about, because like I said, when I'm doing my research on this stuff, without really giving an artist a, well, in this case, a rough sheet, right? There was no way I was gonna be able to pull up a final price, but just looking through some of the forums, some people are like, yeah, mine was like $3,000, and I was like, my first car was $3,000.
There was a raffle. I think it was one of the most famous fursuits. Didn't it just sell for like $15,000 for a custom?
It could be. If anyone's familiar with the maker Mixed Candy, they just did a raffle that I think ended at $26,000
for a custom suit. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, you have to think about it, right? Like, if if you respect the artist and the artist's time and their experience, art by itself is going to cost you money, and a fursuit is art that you have to wear. Like, it's an extra layer. Like, a person has to be inside of this and be able to move in this. At the same time, it has to look exactly like the art, And so, you have to combine several different mediums to make it. Like, you have to know what material will look like what. Like, plastic's probably not going to look great as feathers on the wings. Like, so what will? Like, are you going to cut it out of cardboard? Do you have the skills to cut feathers out of cardboard? Gluing it together. Will it hold together if somebody's moving in it? You don't have to think about these things with the portrait that you buy, but this has to be something that is convincing and recognizable, and somebody is moving in it all the time. It's going to be really expensive.
So, and that's actually, to me, that's like, wow, it's a lot of money. But at the same point, right, people that are, this is something that they love, right? I kind of equate it to some of the professional cosplayers, right? Because in an essence, this is a similar craft, slightly different with it, but because that's something I'm more familiar with is cosplaying. Some of those costumes that you see people have, from Warhammer 40K or World of Warcraft and whatnot, easily thousands of hours plus, if not thousands of dollars worth of just materials alone, let alone all that time that goes into it. So it's interesting to see that type of craft carries over into another world, which for me, right, equating it over, which is now the furry fandom. So it's really cool to see that type of paralleling between the two of them.
there are also a bunch of different kinds of fursuits. Zach, I just sent you like a guide of you could get a full suit, but that would cost $5,000-$6,000. But you could certainly get something similar or smaller for much less. So I actually have a tail, just the tail of Anarchy, and that costs $300. And you can start small. Okay. It's not like you don't have to buy the full suit at once. You know, you can buy hand paws, you can buy a head, you can buy feet paws or whatever, and it's still all valid.
See, and that's actually what I was going to ask was for people who were interested in kind of getting a little bit into that type of stuff, what would be like for people who want to have some of the gear, what would be probably like a good starting point for those people?
I would say if those people have access to go to a convention, buy your stuff at a convention because you get to see it. It may not be custom parts, but you can there will be fursuit makers at conventions with a booth, and they'll sell tails, ears, hand paws, feet paws, and you can see it, you can feel it. You don't have to have the worry of what if I pay for this and it never arrives and this person makes off with my money. I think that's a really great way to start. And there are even a handful of fursuit makers that will sell partials. That's how my partner got his partial, was from a convention. We saw it at the convention, and he said, "Yep, I'm getting this."
So now, at the convention, did they order essentially like what they wanted to be, or what was on the table? Like, yes, that is exactly what I want it to be. Like, how did that process work?
This particular fursuit maker had, I would say, 2 to 3 dozen pre-made partial suits that they brought with them and sold out of fairly quickly at the convention. So they were all like pre-made characters and whatnot.
Okay, no, that's really cool. Wow.
Also, there's like a term, right, that's enough for like people who wear partials. Like, didn't you call it poodling?
That's yeah, that's something a little different. That's
got it.
Poodling is when you can see skin. So like when you shave down a poodle and it has poofs of hair and then like skin, essentially. So it'll be like if someone were wearing a fursuit head and the hand paws, but their arms were exposed and they didn't have like sleeves on. Which is an oddly contentious thing in the fandom. Not anymore, but it used to be a really big thing that people really hated when other people poodled. And I'm so happy that we're pretty much over that because it's silly.
It seems strangely elitist.
Oh, very much so.
Well, that's what I was about to say, right? Is it kind of goes back to what I've been seeing in chat a little bit too, of like it's kind of that gatekeeping nature of like, again, you need all of this gear to be in this community when that doesn't matter, right? It's the mindset of this is who I am, this is what I enjoy, I'm gonna go do this thing, you know?
I really actually kind of like it when people come to me and tell me like I'm not a furry because I don't have a fursuit, because it immediately tells me who I shouldn't talk to. It's like the second someone opens their mouth and starts gatekeeping, I'm like, cool, I can avoid you and everyone you associate with. Like a toxic ass mentality. I know people who have spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars on partial parts, and then they're told by full fursuiters that they're not enough because they only have partials. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, again, it kind of harkens back to that whole just elitist mentality that people have where, you know, so I come from photography background a lot because that's what I used to do for work when I was up in college. And I remember starting off really small with for me, what I thought was a great camera that cost like, you know, $400. That was a hell of a lot of money when I started in, right? And, you know, I'd go to these events that people would have, you know, multi-$1,000 bodies alone, plus another multi-$1,000 lens. And they just like, what is this, you know, peasantry? And I'm sitting here like, I looked at your photos on Instagram. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and the beholder is not me. So it was just one of those things that it kind of really opened up my eyes to that type of elitism, and I don't know if that's the right word for it, but just that type of mentality. And maybe for some of those that are out there, don't give a shit what they think. If you're not going to take advice from them, don't take criticism from them. That's my takeaway real quick.
I think also maybe to add a little bit on that is that, being a furry, there's not like one clear-cut way to be a furry. Like you have to fit this mold in order to, officially quote unquote be a furry, because, even though a lot of people in the fandom are like super creative and artists and can draw super well, like I can draw for the life of me. So like I think that adds maybe to like the whole fursuit thing. Like you don't have to be an artist, or you don't have to be creative. And also creativity comes in many forms. Like you can be a writer, or you can be like a streamer or musician or anything like that. So people, whenever someone tries to gatekeep, like, well, you're not like this, so you're not a furry, like what Hawk said, like those people don't give them any attention.
Yeah, very good point. So this question that I have, which might be one of the last ones, just based off of some of the timing here. I didn't want to stop it early because I thought the conversations we were having were incredibly important, so I wasn't too concerned. But also, just a question to all of you, or just in general, saying if you need to leave, please feel free. I don't want to hold you hostage here at the table. So, one of the questions that I had that's a little bit different than the furry community as in whole, but now that I have you all here, VTubing and V-streaming, which is essentially what all of you currently do have on, right? Because you have your rig set up that have your sonas in, and you're showcasing this, and essentially it is a quote-unquote mask, right? One of the questions that I had is what is it like creating behind essentially that kind of a mask? I know some of you do show yourself as well, but specifically when you do have your rigs up and that's your primary presentation, what is it like to create content behind that? For this one, I'll start with Hawk.
So VTubing is really interesting because it's sort of like part of the excitement of streaming is like seeing the expressions and the reactions of the streamer, and something that you sort of have to get used to when you're doing VTubing is the rig will react to your facial expressions in weird ways. Like people have noticed my eyes bug out every so often. I have a nasty habit of touching my face, which I need to stop, because when I touch my face, it messes with the tracking. But like I find that the rig will be expressive. Like even though Ava and I have the same rig, and a lot of people use this model because it's freely available and easy to recolor. But I noticed that different people behind this same rig will look different. They will be expressive in different ways, and it sort of takes on a life of its own. And so it's sort of like puppetry, or like where like sometimes you specifically do things with your face that will translate in the rig. Okay. And it's really interesting swapping between the two, because like there's times where I want to be on camera and I want people to see my face, and I want to be able to emote and express things with my actual face rather than a rig. And then there's other days where I'm like, no, I look like a gremlin. Do not perceive me. I want to be behind my rig. Like, and it's a sort of comfort to have this character that I know I can still put on like the same entertaining show I do for every stream, even if I'm not looking my best or feeling my best.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add?
Yeah. Like I want to add on to like what Hawk said, and also add on some of like my own words, which is like having gotten a VTubing model like really changed the energy of streaming for me. And like I feel like a lot of people who don't stream, or maybe are curious about streaming but haven't done it, don't really understand what I probably mean when I say the energy. But like the energy is kind of everything as a streamer. Like your interaction with your audience, the way you feel that day, like all of that, like coupled into the word energy is like so important to you as a streamer and to the people that you. And part of that energy is like your facial expressions. And like you have to be able, like when you're streaming with a webcam, you have to sort of be able to like act a little bit, like over express, at least when you're starting out. And like Jordy and I had this conversation recently, like at least on Jordy's stream, where he showed a clip of himself when he was first streaming, and he was like, why do I look so bored? It was like his first raid ever, and he wasn't like reacting at all to the raid. And he's like, why was I like that? Like as you stream more, you get more into it. Okay. And like you start realizing like, oh, like my face is like really important. Like the way I say things is really important. Like all of that energy, and like VTubing sort of like adds to it and like removes a lot. Like I know, like I started doing a lot of Kaizo streams, like Kaizo Mario streams, which is really hard Mario platforming streams, and on top of that, like really hard Celeste levels. And I know that like when I'm concentrating on trying to beat a level, I have no idea what my face is doing. I know what my face's default is, which is to look like I'm pissed and really bored. And I'm like, I really can't have anybody thinking that I'm pissed and bored if I'm streaming. Like that's not gonna fly. So like I can just put on like the VTube model for Slumber, and like he's a cartoon, you know, which is like already automatically really fun to look at. And then I don't have to think about my face, and people are still like getting my energy of just like being like talkative and friendly and there, you know, like it really aids me in like what I'm trying to do. But like I also can't to the same extent be as emotive as I would like, because my face, so a lot of face tracking technology is catered towards a specific kind of face. It's easy to say like a Caucasian face, because I am part Asian, and so my at least especially like when I'm smiling or when I am like speaking a lot, like my eyes will be a lot more closed looking than a Caucasian person's would. And so when I first started VTubing with Slumber, I noticed that like the model would register my eyes as closed a lot. Because the tracking software thought that my eyes were closed, even though I was seeing the screen. Like the tracking software assumed that my eyes were closed, and I was like, okay, well then I'll have it stop tracking my eyes. So that it doesn't look like I'm blinking or like asleep on camera. And so like the eyes are like automatic. They don't track anymore about where I'm looking or how often I'm blinking, even though the technology can do that. And so like if I were to play like a horror game where like part of the appeal is seeing me scared, like I wouldn't do it with the VTube model, because like a lot of the expression is lost. Or maybe if I'm just chatting, you know, like I know that I'm a very expressive person when I'm chatting, I wouldn't have the VTube model on because it hides a lot of what I look like. So like its strength is also its weakness, I guess you could say. But it's become a really big part and a really favorite part of mine too, streaming.
Okay. I had go for it.
So for me, I don't like my voice. I don't like my face. I don't like looking, you know, when I'm streaming and I look over at like my stream preview and I see myself, I cringe. I don't like that. But ever since I got into VTubing, I feel like my confidence has gone up. Because like when I watch back over clips or VODs, or when I look over at my stream, I'm seeing me, I'm seeing Avalanche. And you know, Avalanche is someone who I would want to follow on Twitch, and is someone that I would want to enjoy watching, where I've never felt that about, you know, my human self. So I feel like that's what I've taken away from VTubing and why I really enjoy doing it, because it allows me to be someone who, you know, I want to follow.
Yeah, understood. So one question that I have that's kind of based off of some of this conversation, and I'll start the first question kind of towards Rad and Setsuna here. Your models are more 2D in nature versus the 3Ds of like Hawk, Jordy, and Ava, correct?
Yes.
Now, your expressions and stuff like that, is that controlled through some expressions? Because I know every software is a little different. Do you have something on like a Stream Deck or something like that you can toggle like eye motions and stuff like that? Or is it all tracked through the software for your models?
Setsuna, do you want to go first? Or
Oh no, you go first.
okay, yeah. So the software. So something that I should explain is that there's a slew of software you can use for this stuff, and like for 2D models, it's different than 3D models. Right now, I'm using a free software from Steam called PRPR Live. So there's like certain things that are possible, like I could track my blinking and my eye movement and my eyebrows, and like right now all I'm having a track is my mouth, so like my model's mouth moves and like my body movements and stuff. But like for extra things, I think the person I commissioned for this model called them stickers.
Okay.
I'm not really sure, but like there's essentially like built-in art that I can use to like force an expression on Slumber, for example, and then I have those as keybinds. So like if somebody like said something like really like complimenting me or whatever, and I wanted to blush, like I could do that.
Okay.
Hold on, let me try and remember.
Which keybind?
This is me angry. This is Nick.
How do I blush again?
Yeah.
This one. It's this one. So like,
Okay.
like it'll like put like a sticker of art like on top of my model, and like all of a sudden it looks like I'm blushing, or I could have like heart eyes, like an anime person, you know? So like if like I was faster and more practiced at this, like I know with the Stream Deck, you could have these on buttons and like just swap them all the time. But like it's part of the fun.
Okay.
Now, Rod, if I were to say something like your tank top is so cute, but it would look better on my floor, what would you be able to do something?
Oh, okay. This is something so... Yes, I can take my model shirt off here.
Ooh
Like-
la la, those
This
pecs.
is very... It's, for some reason, very popular on my channel. I can't see why.
I can't imagine why that'd be the case.
3D models also do have that capability. Like I always just have it set as a blank face, but I can be really excited, which looks creepy.
Oh, okay.
Or I can be sad.
Oh.
Or what is angry? Angry. There we go. You know,
See, I didn't realize that came with the 3D expressions, because some of the research that I was doing, I was only finding at the time 2D models. So that's actually really cool to see that there is expressions for 3Ds as well.
And that's also why like Hawk and I are using the same model, but he's so much more expressive than me because he's using a different software. I'm using VC Face, which is very limited, and it's a free one. I don't know what you use Hawk.
I use FaceRig. I mainly have stuck with FaceRig, even though it's more resource heavy. I've stuck with it because it has active eyebrow tracking and ear movements. So I can do more expressive stuff. Like if I look angry or serious, it's just because I look angry or serious.
Perfect. Okay. So I think based off of where we're at, because we've been going for almost 2 hours here, I kind of want to, I think, wrap up at least where this conversation is, and maybe there'll be a follow-up one down the line here. I wanted to kind of ask a final question. What do you think is kind of the big takeaway, I suppose, about the furry community as a whole? Do you think there is a big takeaway behind it that you want to make sure people know and understand, or is it just kind of, have fun and be you and be expressive? I kind of wanted to ask that question of what kind of final words do you want people to know about when it comes to the furry community? And this one here, if you don't mind, I'm going to go in order to how everybody's on the stream here. So that would put Hawk in the hot seat.
I think for me, the main takeaway is that, I mean, we're all just people. I mean, we have a very specific like niche interest, but let's be honest, who doesn't love Looney Tunes? And I guess the major takeaway for people who aren't familiar with furry fandom would like to be more involved, or at least demystify it for themselves. Just, I guess, take part in activities like people coming up with their own personas just to see like how that whole process works is always a great way, because there's no way to do it wrong. You just kind of put your imagination to work, come up with these ideas for a character, and then by the end of it, maybe you'll understand the community as a whole a little bit better. Even if you don't see yourself as a furry, by the end of the process, you might understand people who do a little bit better.
Okay. Rod?
I would say, off of Hawk's point about like people like the fact that like the fandom is going to be it's probably going to be very welcoming, and it's probably going to feel great and like a relief. But you have to remember that like, just like in any community, you're going to run into people you love and you're going to run into people you don't like. And like, there's sort of this concept or this like prevailing idea in the furry community about like the fantasy, you know, like there's like a lot of people who don't want the fantasy broken. Like they sort of immerse themselves into a different personality or a different world. And you like as a person, like not you, Zach, but like anybody listening, like you are going to figure out where you fit in with this fantasy, like whether you want to live a fantasy yourself, or maybe you're more like me and you're sort of like half in, half out. You regardless, like do in the furry community what you like, and keep in mind that it's still a person behind the persona. So like, if you have bad interactions, don't paste that over the rest of the community. Just that's the person that you had a bad interaction with, and that's just them. You know, like there could be other people like them that you also don't like, but it's not a reflection on the community. It's very much the same conversation around LGBT plus people. Like you kind of can't. This is like the thing is like. The thing that brought a ton of LGBT people together is that they're outcast from heteronormative society. Like I don't really have much in common with like a lesbian, for example. Like, but except for the fact that like society really doesn't like us in the same way and thinks that we're deviants in the same way. And so like we're in a community together because of what other people think about us. Like furry is a little bit different because like we all sort of choose to be furries and we choose our personas, we make them. But in the same way, it's like that's really the only thing holding us together. Like our interests could be so different, and the circles we run in the furry community could be so different. So like it doesn't, like furry is just the people, like the person you are and the people you hang out with. You know, pick better people if you're having a bad time. Dump the people you don't like, and take that and use it for the rest of your life. You know, like it's about what you make it.
Thank you. Satsuna.
The furry fandom is just as nuanced as anything else in life. Whether it's, you know, your classmates, the people you go to school with, or the people that you work with, there are going to be people from different walks of life who have different perspectives on everything. And some of them you're going to agree with, and some of them you're not going to agree with. And we're all just people trying to make connections and friendships and find community. And a furry YouTuber that I really enjoy was talking recently about what is the fandom? Like, how do you define the fandom in terms of its scope or its size? And the conclusion that they came to was it's who you interact with, not someone across the sea in Russia. Like, they are not part of your fandom. They're in the fandom, but they're not in your community. If you've never met them before, you know, it's insignificant. So like Rod was saying, you pick who you want to be with, and as it was said before, Twitch is a great way. Twitch is honestly the most positive furry space that I've come across.
Oh, same.
By far. So yeah, it's really, like I said, it's as nuanced as real life.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Ava.
I think, to me, the furry fandom is sort of just whatever you want to make it, you know. If you are here to meet new people and, you know, hang out with like-minded people, if you want to get a fursuit, if you want to not, if you want to go to cons, if you want to stream on Twitch, you know, there's a store. It's all up to you. This is what you make it. There are no rules, or there are rules, but there's no like guidelines. There's no entry fee. There's nothing holding you back from being whoever you want to be within the fandom.
Okay. Thank you. And Jordy.
Yeah, I think a lot of things have already been said, so I try not to repeat most things. For me, when I joined the fandom, like I said before, it really felt like sort of coming home and taking a warm bath. Like everyone was so nice and welcoming, and that to me made it feel more like, you know, being part of like a new family, because everyone that I've met so far is so nice. And sure, there's probably bad people, but I just try to stay away from all the drama. And I think maybe I can give that to people who are, you know, maybe interested in joining as well. Like I've heard so many times people say that they are sort of afraid to approach, you know, quote unquote, the bigger streamers because they feel that they won't like to talk with them or anything. And I think I know I can speak for all of us here, but I think a lot of people in the community as well that, you know, don't ever be afraid to talk to us or to approach us, because, you know, we're also just people, and we also just like to express our love for, you know, being a furry and being in the fandom. So yeah, that's something I would like to give, I guess, to others as well. And also, I guess, also on the flip side, on that note of we're all people too, you know, even if we are, you know, our Sona on stream, there's still a person behind that. So, you know, treat everyone as you would another person as well. Like, you know, there have been some people that, you know, are sort of like low-key in love with your Sona, and then they act that way as well, which is just uncomfortable, I guess. So yeah, just treat everyone as people, and I guess you would just have a good time.
Thank you very much.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I was like, I think it's really nice to hear so much about this community, right? Because going into this, the amount of, at least from my side of it, the amount of experience and interaction that I had was always people telling me, you know, hey, these are the people you should be avoiding. And then I had to start questioning that type of mentality of, you know, why should I do what everybody else is just telling me to do without really any you know, thought about it. And I think one of the largest takeaways that I'd like to kind of leave everybody with a little bit is question everything. Question why you're doing the things that you're doing. Question why you have the thoughts that you have, especially when it comes about hatred or disdain towards certain groups of people. Why does that hate or disdain exist? And I think a lot of the time when you start asking that type of question, you'll actually see most of the time it's because society thinks it's okay to do that, or because it's funny to make fun of these type of people or anything else. And that's not okay. You know, one of the things that I talked about a lot during our last podcast was kindness is free. Spend it willingly. And you'll go far in life. And that's kind of, I think, the final takeaway that I'd like to put out there is question the things that are out there and, you know, do unto others as you'd wish unto you. So, now, one of the things that I'll do for a moment here, if any of my wonderful, wonderful guests, also, hold on a second here. Hold on. Let's back the train up. First of all, peeps, and this is what I call my chat peeps, because we're the Plenty Peeps community. Can we please have a huge thank you to every one of the amazing guests that we have here? First of all, Hawk, thank you. Shark, thank you. That was weird calling you Shark Rod. Setsuna, thank you. Ava, thank you. And Jordy, thank you. Seriously, you have all been able to spread such amazing perspectives, and thank you for sharing your stories and being out here to showcase such an amazing community that I really do feel is kind of, unfortunately, the harbinger of a lot of unnecessary bad attitudes and whatnot. I really appreciate all of you showing that there's more to this community than just simply what, CSI and an unfortunate orgy in a movie theater happens to show. I really appreciate that we have more perspective to look into, to be able to question and, really learn about this type of stuff. So everybody, thank you. If you are not already following a lot of these amazing people, please, please, please go check out Hawk, Shark, Setsuna, Ava, and Jordy. These are all amazing people, and I really appreciate them taking the time to come out here and do this. And I also appreciate all of your patience with me finding and kind of finding topics to want to bring into this PlentyATalks thing. I try to actually build relationships with all the people that are here and not just reach out and be like, hey, want to join this thing? So it takes a lot of time. And to all of you, thank you for being such great friends as well. I really appreciate you all. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. This is great.